Hi, hello, hi. I hope that all is well and you're having a good week. I wanted to jump on because I wanted to share a tip around communication. Communication is a big subject. We know how we interact with each other, how we deal with challenging situations, how we assert ourselves. It's a wide area. There is one particular aspect that I wanted to talk about right now because I think it is so often the key to a lot of our communication challenges, and that is saying what you're thinking and saying what you're feeling. Of course, there are going to be times where you need to be cautious around just simply saying what's on your mind and expressing exactly how you feel about that situation or that person. However, we're going to throw out there that we've all got common sense, and we can take this with our own sort of boundaries and, as I say, common sense around it. So I'm going to give you the 3 reasons that I think it's important to say what we're thinking and to say what we're feeling. And the first one is very much about not wanting to kick yourself afterwards. Oh, why didn't I say that thing? And it's not even that it's always going to be a negative. It can be a positive thing that you wanted to say. So what I mean by that is you walk away and you think, oh, why didn't I just simply say what was on my mind? And it could be the simplest thing. It could be when somebody is talking to you and you get distracted, and then you realize that you've got distracted, and you just think, oh, you feel bad about it, and then you're thinking about that thing, which I'll come on to, which causes a hiccup in a minute. But the point is, if we paused and said, I'm sorry, I was distracted in that moment. I'm back on track. Carry on. Just because people notice when you tune out. Or if you really aren't available to have that conversation at that moment of time, you've got something coming on up immediately afterwards in terms of a time deadline, or your mind is on something else because of something else. And simply sharing that at the start of the conversation, or as importantly, midway through the conversation, if you suddenly realize that you can't pay attention for whatever reason, is sharing that and just say, I'm sorry, I want to hear this is important. I can't listen to this right now, or whatever it is, I'm conscious I've got something else afterwards. My mind is thinking I need to plan that. Can we arrange a time? And it works the other way as well. Like if you're noticing that somebody isn't paying attention, or you suddenly notice that they're kind of making signs of needing to get away, is giving them the way out, and saying, hey, I'm noticing that. I'm noticing that at this moment in time you seem to have something else on your mind, or is there something that come up, can I come back another time, or whatever it is. And by the way, if somebody asks you that, be honest and say yes, okay? Don't say no if the answer is yes, okay? So this comes back to saying what you're thinking and saying what you're feeling. And as I say, it can be positives as well, because sometimes we think things and we don't share the positives as well. So that can be yeah, you look lovely today, or I'm so grateful that I have you in my life, or I love you, or you're the best boss ever, or I love having you as a colleague, or I'm so grateful for our friendship, or whatever it may be. Say what you're thinking. Say what you're thinking. So the first one is, so you don't kick yourself afterwards. You don't come away for a conversation thinking, gosh, why didn't I say that? Or, I was really short with them, because quite often you end up being frustrated with that person, even though they don't know that they're occupying your time. Or, oh, why didn't I say that thing that I was thinking? So the first one is that you don't kick yourself afterwards in that situation, which is also part of the second one. And the second one is you will actually deal with what the situation is. And part of that is, so one of the things that I talk about is how we can look at the thing behind the thing, or the higher issue. Because quite often when I'm talking to people about communications and conversations they're having, particularly challenging conversations where somebody isn't doing something that they would like them to be doing. So it can be at work, it can be at home, it can be a performance thing, but sometimes you get really drilled into, people drill into the thing, that the task that they didn't do, or the way that they responded, or why they are or aren't doing something, but they look at each example very specifically, and they can really get drawn into sort of having a conversation down here, whereas actually the conversation needs to come up a level, sometimes to a much higher level, to really understand the why. Now that doesn't mean you can always get that. So so for example, you know, there has to be some awareness on the other person's behalf as well, because so for example, if a behavior is being repeated, for example, and it's their way of pushing back against something, you can't really go in and say, hey, I'm really noticing that I think this looks like passive aggressive behavior. That might need to be worded in a different way. But what I wanted to say is, as I say, is if you start thinking, well, if you start sharing what you're thinking and what you're actually feeling, sometimes it naturally brings that conversation up to the level that you want. And tying into the other one, it stops you wishing that you'd said it, and you don't go away kicking yourself. So, for example, it could be, I'm going to use frustrated because it's sort of one of the easier one, is, you know, I'm feeling frustrated, okay, because that tends to be what is happening. I am feeling frustrated because, and it could be anything. So recent examples of conversations that I've had with others who have had challenging conversations have included, I'm feeling frustrated because I feel that nothing I can say is going to convince you about X. I don't think there's anything that I can say. And you can, as one of the other communications tips that I talk about in more detail, is sometimes asking different questions. So that could have been a question which is, you know, is there anything that you need to hear? Is there anything that I could say that could convince you of this point? So the first one is there anything that you need to hear, or what is it that you need to hear? Passes that kind of responsibility for you trying to figure out what it is that's going on for them, what they need to hear. So it could be, I'm feeling frustrated by this, and it could be, you know, ending a conversation saying, you know, I'm going to bring this conversation to an end because I'm feeling frustrated because I feel that I'm not being heard, or I feel that nothing I can say will convince you. And if there, as I say, if there is anything, then do let me know. Or it could be, you know, I'm feeling frustrated because when X, Y, Z happens, I interpret that, or I experience that as, you know, or even, you know, when X happens, or when you do X, I feel frustrated, I feel like I can't rely on you, I feel unloved, and it's lifting it up, because, you know, the fact that somebody hasn't done something, you can start, why didn't you, oh, I was late, I was tired, why is it my responsibility, why is it this, that? And actually that conversation doesn't take us anywhere. The conversation above it is why that isn't happening. So if somebody isn't keeping you updated when they ought to be, or aren't getting ahead with their projects, or aren't managing their time, the question is the why. And sometimes it's the real why, as I say, because sometimes, oh, my workload, and that can be a genuine thing. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes that's an excuse, or sometimes it's a skill that needs to be looked at. But if you aren't sharing your frustration, I feel like I can't rely upon you, or I feel let down, or whatever it is, that communication isn't there. So it's you will actually deal with the issue at hand if you share what you are thinking and what you are feeling, rather than simply always focusing on the example. The example or the activity that you're talking about is there to sort of show where that frustration is coming from, or how you're experiencing something. So it is very much, you know, sharing how you are interpreting events. It's not about saying I am right and you are wrong, but when you share how you are feeling or what you are experiencing, it allows the other person to understand how you are reacting. And then you can ask the other person, is that what was intended, or how are you experiencing, you know, this moment? So as I say, it's saying what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And the first one, as I say, so you don't kick yourself afterwards. So you've said what is going on for you in that moment, rather than wishing you had said it afterwards. So you're being clear on that. The second is that it often brings the conversation up so that you are dealing with the real issue. And the third one is because it closes the communication gap. And what I mean by that is, you know, as humans, we want to communicate with each other. We want to connect with each other. Human connection is one of the biggest areas of our life. You know, there's a really good reason why a punishment is to exclude somebody from a group, is to exclude somebody from a friendship, from a relationship, from society. There is a reason for that, and if we go back, you know, historically, you know, staying in our tribes meant, you know, surviving. So it's really built into us. So improving that communication and closing the gap. Okay, so by saying what you're thinking and what you're feeling can also close that gap and make sure you maintain that connection. So coming back to the example I gave earlier about distraction, if you're distracted, the other person notices. And so if you're honest about it, it closes that communication. Or if you're busy or whatever it is, or, you know, if you're stressed or upset about something that's not them, or not something they can deal with, or whatever it is, it closes the gap because you've shared what is happening, so that they don't have to interpret, they don't have to make up their own story of what is going on for you. And then it's also coming back to sort of being authentic, because if you are sharing what you are thinking and what you are feeling, then you are being authentic, you are being honest, and that honesty comes across. People can usually tell if you're not being truthful, not always, but the more honest you are, it's easier. So it actually is easier to have conversations with people, because you can say what's going on for you. And also the other way, you can say I'm sorry more as well, because you can just say, oh, I'm so sorry, that did not come out the right way, I didn't mean it that way, I'm sorry. And I know that there's some challenges in society, I think, at the moment, that I don't know, there's a lot of blame culture going on at the moment, and sorry, people seem to have some rules that are being really applied about you can say one thing wrong. So I appreciate, as I say, we have to take some concepts around this, but generally, you know, you can say, I'm sorry, I was distracted, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way, because that's what you're thinking. And as I say, in that moment that you're thinking, oh gosh, that didn't come out right, oh gosh, I didn't mean to say that, you have taken your attention off the other person, and you have created that communication gap. And as I say, it can be positive. You could be sat there admiring that person, but you've tuned out. And you can, if you are open and honest and sharing what you're thinking and what you're feeling, it closes that communication gap, which means that it brings that connection together, it brings that relationship together. So this was something I was sharing recently, and I wanted to share it a little bit wider, because I think it's such a useful tool. We can get very caught up in sort of how to have certain conversations, and yes, you know, there is more to challenging conversations, how to give effective feedback. You know, I cover all of those topics, how to become more confident, assertiveness, how to move if you've got a particularly aggressive style of communication, how to bring it back, you know, how to grow our presence in communication. So of course there's different areas. However, I say the easiest way, it takes practice, it takes habit forming, is to get into this habit of noticing what you're thinking and noticing what you're feeling, and thinking about sharing it, and how can you share this with the other person to make a difference to this communication, to make a difference to this cycle. It's particularly because a lot of the time these things are in a cycle. You keep talking about the same thing, but you know, you're not looking at, as I say, the overall arching theme that's going on. So 3 reasons, as I say, to share what you're thinking, to share what you're feeling, or the impact that this conversation is having on you, is, as I say, one is, it just means that you're not going to kick yourself as often. I say as often because, as I say, it still comes up. Kick yourself as often afterwards. That's not to say you're not going to have those, insightful moments in the shower or driving home. Oh, why didn't I think of that thing to say? You'll still get those. So one, as I say, is you won't kick yourself as much after conversations. Two is it often makes it very, it takes the issue higher. So you're actually talking about what needs to be spoken about rather than, sometimes the detail, which isn't actually the conversation that needs to be had. And the third one is because it improves communication, it improves connection, it closes that gap in communication. So please go away and give it a try, see how you get on, and just, as I say, check in with yourself, how you honestly would like to communicate, how you honestly feeling, what are you honestly thinking. Be genuine, be honest, and it might be that adding a light touch can help as well. So humour, if you can throw that in, great, but it's got to be real, it's got to be authentic for you. And be honest, if you need to say, as I say, I'm sorry, throw it in there. Okay, have a great rest of the day, have a great rest of the week, and let me know how you get on.